This is a Defocus Media production. Welcome to Sports Vision Pros. Our mission is to build a community where individuals come together to enhance our understanding of vision and performance. All right, and welcome to the Sports Vision Pros podcast. Today we have an incredible lineup, an incredible panel of some rock stars that are optometrists, but also national shooting champions, right? So I'm super excited to introduce my colleagues, my friends. We're going to kick it off with Dr. Keith Smithson. We have Dr. Derek Cunningham, Dr. Joshua Black, and Chris Ripley. Welcome to the show. How are you guys doing today?
Hey, Daryl.
Awesome.
Great to be here, man.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited about today's podcast because we're going to talk about, the importance of sports vision and presbyopia. As an early presbyope, it's starting to get real for me. My life is changing. I'm constantly starting to do this number, and I think I'm about ready to make that jump. So I'm very excited about this conversation today, and I would love to get started. But before we go too far, let's get to know who each and every one of you are. Dr. Smithson, if you don't mind kicking it off and giving us an intro and passing it over, sir.
Yeah, thanks. So Dr. Keith Smithson here. I have a private practice outside of Washington, D.C. area. We have multiple practices. We work with every professional sports team in the Washington, D.C. area. So do a lot of work with sports vision. And unfortunately, I have many more birthdays than Dr. Darrell Glover up there. So my arms have been long for a long time. So it will only get worse, my friend. So looking forward to talking about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is presbyopia. So Derek, what about you, man?
I'm Derek Cunningham. I'm in Austin, Texas. Work with the University of Texas Longhorns, as well as doing a lot of specialty training for shooting, tactical shooters, and some contract work with different governments for special forces. So, Josh, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm an optometrist down here at Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I'm a former competitive shooter myself. I competed in the Olympic rifle events in college, and I also come from a shooting family. So my fiance is a three-time Olympian. She just competed in Paris, and my sister is also a former U.S. national team member and now a collegiate coach. So I have a lot of experience in the Olympic shooting world.
Show off. All right, Chris, how about you? Let's hear from you.
My name's Chris Ripley. I am a serial entrepreneur who has the great pleasure of traveling the world, shooting a few different disciplines, and much better and much more competitive now that with my new eyes.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's go ahead and get this party started. I think it's only right before we start talking about sports vision and presbyopia that we define presbyopia. So I'd love for us to really break that down because I think it's going to serve as a solid foundation to continue the conversation moving forward.
Dr. Cunningham, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I like to think of presbyopia from a practical aspect of it. To be honest with you, we did some advanced research. If you ever get a chance, you can go to the Journal of Sport and Performance Vision, and there's a comprehensive look at really how presbyopia affects competitive athletes. And we see the early effects of presbyopia actually in the late 30s, to be honest with you. It has to do with lenticular changes. It has to do with neural changes. It has to do with all these kind of things. But from a practical standpoint and where it really affects athletes, and I mean athlete is anyone who performs anything at any level, including driving to work, you actually start to get a deterioration in contrast sensitivity, your ability to resolve, your ability to read reaction times, your glare ability. And then, the tipping point for most is ultimately your inability to focus up close for the people who see well far away. And that's what drives people in our office. That's what we correct. But a lot of times we don't think about all these other aspects that are affecting these athletes unless they're at an extremely elite level and they're working with someone who has a knowledge of this. So for me, it's the tipping point is the inability to focus up close. And this has really significant effects with people who do dynamic sports where they have to see it different, at different distances, especially when you have some stuff really, really up close. So that's presbyopia to me. But again, that's the tip of the iceberg. We look a lot more into the other aspects that are affected as well.
Yeah, in our practice, we call it the over 40 disease, Daryl. So that's essentially when you start going to the drugstore and looking through the rack of reading glasses because you can't see the menu or your cell phone anymore. So, a lot of the elite sports that I work with in the DC area are 20 and 30-year-old athletes. So presbyopia isn't a really critical part of their game quite yet. So that's why we thought it'd be really fun to have this podcast really focus on shooting and talking about a sport where presbyopia is really relevant and where near and far vision can be really important depending on the weapon and the type of shooting you're doing. So it's really a nice conversation about how to correct that over 40 disease in a really elite sport. So yeah, it'd be a lot of fun.
I love this. And, as an optometrist, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little lost in the sauce when it comes to educating my patients about how to use their eyes and aiming and shooting. So I think this is going to be a great conversation on both sides for optometrists out there, but also for our patients that walk in. And I think sometimes our patients may be a little more educated than us when we have this conversation. So I know this conversation is going to be rich, and I'm super excited to get it started, especially now that we have that solid foundation. So I think
that's a great point, Daryl. I mean, every one of our colleagues out there, the students that are still in optometry school and our colleagues out there fitting patients every day with glasses, contact lenses, and surgical correction, you're going to see a shooter. You're going to encounter a shooter, and trust me, shooters are looking for you. So we're hoping this podcast becomes a nice primer for you to really understand some of those really critical parts of effectively helping a shooter. And again, I'm a recreational shooter. I have fun shooting, but I don't certainly know anything like these two individuals on the top of the screen, and certainly Derek as well. But to the levels of their game, they're the experts in that game. So being comfortable from a practitioner standpoint is saying, look, I know what I can do in correcting vision, but you're the expert in your game. So if you don't understand the weapon or the shooting or the type of sport they're doing, ask them what their weapon is, how it needs to be corrected, and then you can help them with those vision corrections that they need. So I know we'll get into that a little bit more, but yeah, to your point, every one of our colleagues is going to see shooters. They want to be fit correctly. They want to be listened to, and they want to have a product that's going to work for them. So hopefully by the end of this will help answer a lot of those questions.
I love that. I love that. And I would love to get started and maybe even present a question to both of you gentlemen, but also Dr. Black, because when I think about shooting, I think about the concept of looking at the target, but I know it's more than a target. I know you're looking at different ranges. You're trying to focus on things. But again, I'm not really sure where to begin the conversation whenever that takes place. So I'd really love to touch on the importance of, targeting whenever you're doing shooting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can start with that one. So when it comes to shooting, I think where you focus your gaze is a little bit different between the different types of shooting events and shooting sports. And every shooter might have kind of their own way of doing things. So in the Olympic shooting sports, which is my background, most of the athletes tend to focus on the target, the distance portion of their vision, as opposed to their actual front sight on the rifle. And that may be a little bit different than somebody who's doing local, pistol competitions, who may want to focus their attention more on the front of their pistol sight. So a lot of times I think the shooter patients, they will come to you and often will know what they want. And you kind of have to listen to that, because a lot of times the shooters will know, hey, I'm trying to see this particular thing that is this far away. And using our knowledge as optometrists, we can help kind of guide the prescribing of the lenses based on what they're telling us that they want. Gotcha.
One of you guys want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, this is important you touch on this, because the thing that there's so much more that goes into it. I think Josh has been pretty humble about this. What Josh is talking about is basically he's in the Formula One of focus, and that's really what it is. And it's beyond conceptualization as far as when you get to the Olympic level and what they're doing and how they're focusing and their breathing and their targeting and when they shoot and how they shoot and and then on the flip side you have something like what Chris does, which you can actually think of as more of like a wet cat. They're trying to basically keep track of their environment. Nothing that they shoot is ever still. They're having to focus on both something at optical infinity and something at arm's length. And so it's much more of a scattered approach to vision and dynamic vision. And, to be honest with you, the hard focus that Joshua becomes infinitely, excelling at is something that sometimes we don't want on something that Chris does. Chris, for instance, you're in more of a dynamic shooting environment, sporting clays, birds, you name it, all that kind of stuff. For instance, tell me if I'm wrong, but you can actually be, it can be detrimental to zero in too much on something at the same time, correct?
Oh my gosh. And I actually have had the opportunity to compete in both hard focus and soft focus shooting sports. And the difference can really be detrimental. And what I mean by that is your brain neuroadapts to this way that you want to shoot this given target. And it just starts happening. In the beginning, you have to focus really hard on the targets. You're looking at the tiny rings, say in an international pistol competition, and then you go and pick up a shotgun, and in that pistol competition you have a constant color target. It's always going to be the same color. You have some pretty regulated light, especially if it's indoors. The distance is always fixed, and you see all those really funny. And that one guy from Turkey really brought it out. All these shades and different ways in which to really standardize the sight picture. And then you do something like the shotgun events that I do, which are all outdoors, and from station to station, course to course, the light varies dramatically, the background varies dramatically, and the targets are actually a dramatically different color schemes from target to target, and they come from different places. So exactly what Dr. Cunningham's talking about is the precision of hard focus and the need to be so precise and at that really high level versus having to rely on your soft focus that then allows you to then focus hard on the target once you've acquired it. And if you start off in my world with a hard focus, the bird or the target is going to be farther away than your shotgun is going to be adequately choked for, able to shoot it. And so if you don't have soft focus with the event that I principally compete in, and that's not where you're starting from, then you are actually not going to be able to compete even at just sort of a regional level.
Well, and I think one of the fun things for my shooters that I talk to, and I think in those competitions, Chris, so you're shooting like 300 birds or something like that in a competition or something, right? And you missed one, you're already down in the lower, you lost 20%, you missed two, forget it. You might as well pack up and go home, right? Isn't that critical? I mean, this is how precise these contests are at that level.
It certainly can be. If you look at something like bunker trap, which is something that my sports emulate, the idea that you are somehow going to be able to put your eyes right where they need to be and be able to pick up that target is hilarious, given how varied it is, how fast it is, and to your point, if you miss one or maybe two in bunker trap, then you're just going home. And I think one of the things that really resonated with me is about what your shooters are going to come in and ask for. So one of the coolest things that Dr. Cunningham has enabled me to do is go out to the shooting community and tell a lot of folks who are about to hang up their lifelong passion that they don't need to. That there is actually, oh yeah, but I'm old and these glasses don't work anymore and this thing and that thing. And I mean, I have 6 or 7 friends who went from the top of the game and then slowly went down to the point where they wanted to quit. Saw Dr. Cunningham, now they're back at the top of the game. But it resonates with me though that your shooters are going to have a good sense of what they want to do. The person that wants to go from breaking 70 targets to breaking 90 targets has a totally different set of things that you can do for them than the person that wants to go from 93 targets to 97 targets or 97 targets to 100 targets. And what's great is that in your bag of tricks, you have something for all of those folks. And what's really interesting is that if you really focused on the hyper elite solutions for all shooters, so you bring that recreational shooter in who just wants to be more competitive, and you give him the hyper elite solution, he's not even going to that's probably not even going to help because it's not really they're not there in their progression yet. And I think that's what's really important about finding a doctor that sort of can speak this a little bit and understand sort of what level you're at, but absolutely listening to them and what their problems are, because I'm Josh will tell you, if your big issue you think is that you can't see the sights, which can be an issue if you're not focusing properly. But if you're staring at the sights, you're never going to be at Josh's level ever, never, ever. It's not possible. However, that might be really sufficient to bring great joy and happiness to some of your patients to get to that medium level of proficiency where they can just have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love this conversation. It's rich of great information. It's something that you touched on was really tools, solutions to be able to see. Gentlemen, I would love to learn a little bit more about, how do we have this conversation with our patients when it comes to contacts, glasses, or surgical procedures? Because everyone's going to want something different, but there's a lot of great innovation and technology out there. But where do you get started when that patient comes in? This conversation today is really enlightening me because I love that we have a patient or a patient and doctor on this conversation, because it really helps us to channel in on both sides of this conversation and be able to speak it, better whenever these patients come in. But how do you figure out what type of tool the patient needs to be able to be successful when it comes to shooting?
Absolutely. There's a lot of variety in how people will use their glasses in the shooting sports. So, at the Paris Olympics, there was a few athletes that went viral on the internet. You may have seen those pictures. One of them was the Turkish pistol shooter. And part of the reason why he went viral was because he was just wearing a regular pair of glasses. There was nothing special about his optical setup. And then there was another athlete, a female pistol shooter, who also went viral on the internet for her kind of unique spectacle setup. She had all kinds of gadgets, and they were both Olympic pistol shooters. So you'll see a lot of variety, and there are tons of different aspects that you can include in your optical setup. So there's of course the prescription, which is kind of just your very basic, which is what the Turkish pistol shooter had. But you have lots of other equipment like color filters and polarizers and adjustable apertures. And you can really go down a rabbit hole with this and get as detailed as you want. And it's not just the glasses that we're talking about here. There's other pieces of optics that play a role into this. You have sights and scopes, and those pieces can get incredibly complex too. So just to show you guys, I actually brought a sight here from an Olympic rifle. So this is the rear sight and this is the front sight. And just these two pieces here are probably a couple $1,000s worth of German engineering.
Oh, wow.
And they have all kinds of unique devices on them. So this has a bubble on it that actually moves, so you can tell what the cant of the sight is. And this device here has built-in color filters. You can actually manipulate a wheel here that changes the color of the filter that you're looking through. So it's not just glasses that go into this, but when it comes to glasses, I think having a high quality refraction is a great starting point. And one of the difficulty with shooters is they have incredibly high visual demands. A 20/20 glasses prescription is often not good enough because the eye is capable of seeing better than 20/20. So oftentimes, shooters will say 20/20 prescription, they have blurry vision, right? And you need to push them a little bit more than that. We're capable of seeing 20/15 or even better. So having a really solid glasses prescription is important. Now that becomes even more challenging when we get to presbyopes, because presbyopes now have basically two different glasses prescriptions they need, or even more than that, where they cannot see up close as well as they can see far away anymore. So how do we adjust the glasses to kind of compensate for those needs? So if you're a pistol shooter, you may be trying to focus on the front sight, and you can't see that very well anymore if you're a presbyope, because you don't have that focusing ability. Another factor that plays into this is not just the clarity of your vision in your glasses, but also how well are you able to maintain that vision. So fatigue
Mm,
over the course of a competition is a big factor that goes into this, especially in Olympic events like mine. These competitions are about 2.5 hours, so having that focus for that amount of time can create a lot of eye strain. And we see early presbyopes, like Dr. Cunningham was mentioning, in their later 30s, are often the first ones to be symptomatic from this, because they aren't able to keep that focus. They fatigue, their visual system fatigues over time. And there's even more into that. There's also, ocular surface. The eyes become more dry over time, so they feel like their glasses or contact lens setup doesn't work as well over the course of the match, and that just may be a factor of dry eye, especially if the wind is blowing towards you. There's all kinds of factors that go into that as well. So really talking to the patient about, are you shooting indoors versus outdoors? What are the conditions like? These are all important considerations in figuring out the best glasses setup.
I love that.
One,
I mean, you really got to understand who's sitting in front of you, right? And what is their
Absolutely.
role. But the thing that I really heard that I feel is universal is you have to have a solid refraction. You have to
Absolutely.
make sure that that refraction is on point. And on top of that, you have to make sure that you assess the ocular surface because we all know if that ocular surface is not healthy, you're not going to get the best refraction. And it sounds like these shooters are a little needy, right?
Absolutely.
So we got to make sure we take it to the next level when it comes to being able to see sharply and clearly. Dr. Keith, what do
Absolutely.
you have for us,
yeah, I was just going to say, in those presbyopic options that Dr. Black was talking about there, they could be bifocals, really like the lined bifocals, depending on the short, the shooting sport, and whether or not that may be a better opportunity or better, lens for them given their weapon and type of shooting. Some may need that progressive lens where they have that middle ground and they're looking at kind of, kind of that middle range focusing need as well. So having that conversation again with them, that a lot of times the person in the chair is the expert, right? Not you. And you're asking them what their visual needs are. Do you need simply two targets? Do you need one target? Do you need multiple targets to be clear? And that's helping you decide between single vision, progressive and bifocals. But the other thing I would say is just from a practical standpoint, a lot of practices may have some shooting glasses or some sports safe glasses that they could use for shooting. Many times I've had my shooters actually bring their frame in that they're more comfortable with. And sometimes it has an aperture or a lens that comes out, and we can actually grind the lens in there. So
Oh,
they're
wow.
just bringing in the tool. We're again doing the refraction and saying, okay, well, we need a lens to go into this little insert that's going to get popped into that frame. So we're still doing the job for them, but they're bringing in the tool that they may have got at some kind of shooting competition, or maybe they've been shooting with it for years. And to Chris's point, it's like a comfortable pair of shoes. You have this pair of shooting glasses that you're comfortable with, and you're going to keep shooting with it, but you need to get those lenses replaced as you continue to age. And that's where we come in doing that refraction and putting the right lens in their tool.
I love it. I love it. So we broke down the concept of shooting glasses. What I want to get into next is surgical procedures, because the cool thing about being eye care professionals is we have a lot of tools in our tool belt and we can accommodate whoever's sitting in front of us. Dr. Cunningham, I'd love for you to explore, the surgical options that are available for our patients out there.
Darryl, one thing before we go on, I can't reiterate what these two said enough about. I can't tell you how many times I see shooters that just aren't corrected to an elite enough level, or that whoever was refracting them stopped at 20/20. And simply correcting that can be significant. I think you have some pictures that I supplied here of, in general shooting, there's something called an idiot sight, which is a red dot. That's the most basic level of shooting. That's what everyone can shoot with, and that's the most simple level of shooting. But even the smallest refraction error can take a red dot. And believe me, I use red dots all the time. All my special forces guys use red dots. Even the most elite shooters use red dots. But this is an early presbyope looking through a red dot versus, on the left is pre-presbyopia, and then on the right is a presbyope. And you can see how the size and the glare of the dot increases even with mild presbyopia, even though theoretically the dot's projected on the target. And if you go to the next one, even with adoptive astigmatism, you can also see that this will significantly alter your sight picture and your targeting ability. So if you look between these two, this is just one diopter of defocus in the for astigmatism.
So, Dr. Cunningham, we've heard, some information in regards to spectacles. Whether it's dynamic or static may depend on single vision versus a multifocal option. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about what options are available when it comes to surgical procedures, because that's just another tool in our tool belt to be able to pull out and accommodate the patients that are in front of us.
Absolutely. So from a surgical standpoint, there's a couple options. Now, one, for any of your nearsighted patients under the age of 40, surface laser correction is certainly an option. That's, surface ablation, SMILE, or LASIK. It really is optimized for nearsighted people. It does not work well for farsighted people. So even up to the age of about 37 to 38, if your patient is even a doctor farsighted, LASIK wouldn't work anyway. But number two, that's when we have to start thinking about replacing the one dynamic part of the eye, which is the intraocular lens. Especially, obviously there's value proposition once you get into your 40s with replacing your lens, stabilizing the eye, giving the shooter standardized vision for the rest of their life, and not having the degradation that happens actually in the early 30s in the dysfunctional lens syndrome, with the changes that can happen.
Awesome.
Yeah, I can add one extra point there. I think this, I work in a primarily surgical practice myself, and I think surgery offers a couple interesting options. And one thing to consider is even if you have surgery, you're probably not going to be independent of glasses as a shooter. And the reason for that is because every time you walk on a range, they make you wear protective shooting lenses for the most part. So I've had a couple of patients who maybe had successful cataract surgery, and then they reach in their range bag and pull out a pair of $10 safety glasses that are all scratched up, and they put those on, and now their vision quality, all of that work has been degraded. So I think wearing glasses after surgery, which may have some of those tints and filters, and maybe you could even tune up the refraction a little bit if you have to. Those are some, now we're really talking about some interesting customization options. One of the things about surgery is that it's not a perfect science. There are targets that we set before the surgery, and sometimes we don't hit the target right on, no pun intended. We don't get the eye to the exact place that we want it to be from a refractive standpoint. There may be a little bit of prescription left over, and then we have to troubleshoot what to do at that point. And that's a really challenging scenario when you go through the surgery, you pay all the money to do it, and you don't get the outcome that you want necessarily. But if you're going to have to wear safety glasses or whatever anyway, there may be some options to kind of crisp things up. And the
Yeah.
last point I'd want to make about surgery is that surgeons love to do surgery, and you have to be, really honest with your surgeon about what you're looking for. Because if you're, say, a one diopter hyperope and you want a refractive procedure, you may find a surgeon willing to do that, but they may not understand that your visual demands are greater than just having, no glasses for distance vision. That you want more than that, and that way you can kind of tailor the surgical decision and where you go from there.
Yeah, Josh, that's actually a great point. I'm going to talk about this ugly point before we move on, but ultimately you're right. To a surgeon, everything's a nail. So one of the things that we've instituted, because of the amount of shooters we see, the amount of pilots, and we also you used to have contracts with the government as well for active duty guys, is our surgeons actually do not make the final call on who can have surgery or not. Now they can veto any surgery they want. They can say no, but especially for anything performance vision based, believe it or not, in a practice like ours, I have to make the decision whether or not the person can have surgery, and then it gets forwarded to the surgeon. And the surgeon can say no, but the surgeon can't say yes without my approval. And that's a check and balance system that some practices have, like mine and yours, I know as well. So remember, if you're going to talk to someone about surgical correction, make sure they have a robust background in surgical correction if you're at an elite level of shooting. Now, interestingly enough, in Chris's case, because he's at such an elite level, I actually consider him a high-risk surgical candidate. And I had this talk with him when he came in, is that, he's coming to me with a problem that requires a solution that we can only achieve in a small percentage of the human population. And surgically, there's things that can go wrong, and not everyone heals properly. And he is much more high risk because he's going to be much more demanding of his vision for a lot longer period of time than the 80-year-old who just wants to watch Murder, She Wrote and everything's kind of okay. So, Chris, why don't you just tell me quickly why you came in to see me, and what were your challenges when you were shooting?
So I was a national champion All-American when I was like 15, 16. And I actually wasn't taught to shoot properly. I shot a shotgun with one eye closed, massively reducing my abilities, my natural athletic abilities. I got to play 2 sports all the way through college, so I was athletic otherwise. But when I gave up shooting for quite some time to follow my entrepreneurial passions, and shooting sort of fell in my lap in Austin, Texas again at age 38. And I'd really almost done no shooting to speak of. I mean, a few hundred rounds between age 18 and age 30, late 30s. And when I picked that shotgun back up again, targets that I was 100% certain that I was going to annihilate, I was missing. I was missing consistently, and I was just having so much trouble with the barrel in the foreground, because as a shotgun shooter, that's really what we're thinking about, and or not thinking about, but that's what it is. And the barrel in the foreground, then the target acquisition, how to have soft focus, I knew how to do all these things, but my eyes just weren't reacting the way I needed to. I didn't have, and so I started out with spectacles. I went and got the most expensive shooting glasses you can get, and I got the right guy to grind them for me. The issue is that for the specific sport that I participate in, I don't like, for trap shooters who know exactly the one point where that target's going to come out of every single time, it will never vary. Or skeet shooters similarly. I've seen corrective spectacles work really well for those folks, because they can align themselves in such a way they can pick colors that help bring out a certain target's um, features, and the target's color, the tints of the lenses, I mean. And but for me, I have targets coming from kind of everywhere, and it was great because I immediately upped my game. Like, I immediately went from someone who was kind of embarrassed to being at the range to someone who's like, oh yeah, that guy can kind of shoot. But I was still nowhere near where I was when I was younger. And I'm also actually a pilot, an aerobatics pilot. So I remember sitting through these conversations with Dr. Cunningham, and just being like, hey man, like, understand that if all you're asking me to do, I think you might even use the Murder She Wrote line. If all you're asking me to do is just make it so that life is better, and you can look at pretty girls on the beach without squinting, then this is going to be great. But what you're trying to get to is going to be difficult. And so we spent, I think we spent a little bit more time trying to decide what some of the best options are. I like to. I also have two different lenses. So that's kind of a cool thing. And who kn- you know, it would be a post hoc fallacy for me to say that's the thing that made all the difference. But I was really confident that it would work. I got to tell you, I almost had a nervous breakdown because I was told over and over and over again how hard it was going to be the first few days after surgery. And I actually, and as a I'm a scientist, that's where most of my patents are. I really didn't believe that the brain could neuroadapt to the extent that it did, because when I first opened my eyes in my apartment in Austin, and everything had circles around it, I thought it was over. But it only took about a week and a half for me to get my first win. And then about 4.5 weeks, I won a national championship. And I mean, I literally 6 weeks prior to that was 50 percentile at best.
Now, let me be clear. I told him no shooting for 2 weeks after the surgery, and he called me in a week and a half later, said he won a competition. So that's, again, shooter mentality.
And a word from our partners at Bausch Lomb. Bausch Lomb multifocal contact lenses are designed to address the dynamic vision needs of today's presbyopes. Daily lenses like INFUSE multifocal and Biotrue ONEday for presbyopia, as well as monthly lenses like Ultra for presbyopia and Ultra multifocal for astigmatism, are all engineered with 3-zone progressive design to deliver outstanding near, intermediate, and distance vision. This innovative design operates seamlessly to provide patients with clear vision, whether they are reading a book, working on a computer, or driving. And with our extensive range of parameters and 2-ad system, you can provide a precise fitting experience for your presbyopic patients with no gaps in coverage. Don't wait. Prescribe Bausch & Lomb multifocal lenses for your presbyopic patients today. Great points all around. We have the spectacle options, we have the surgical procedures, but if you like me, I'm a man that loves contact lens, right? So I'd love to be able to have a conversation, Dr. Smithson, about contact lenses, because I think they are very incredible. I think they can change lives. I think it could potentially help shooters. So I'd love to get some insight in regards to how you communicate with your shooters when it comes to contact lens. And I would really love to focus on the brand of choice that you prefer as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, this is a great way. I mean, having the conversation around the glasses, the shooting glasses, and the surgical options, lends a perfect conversation around contact lenses, because it's really, in some cases, a little bit of both, right? To Dr. Black's point, you're still going to wear protective eyewear over top of your contact lenses to protect the eye. So that's certainly critical and important. surgical correction is permanent, right? So certainly something that we want to have those longer conversations with elite athletes. I do that with my baseball players, hockey players, basketball players, right? This is a permanent procedure. We could always tweak a contact lens, change the prescription slightly, take it out, put a different brand in. So, not as easy with refractive correction and surgical interventions. So something that we have some flexibility with a little bit from a contact lens standpoint. I think the general, trend of the contact lenses, if we look at it in 3 different buckets, our patients are coming in and they're going to probably come out if they're presbyopic with 1 of 3 options. One is we're going to correct both eyes for distance vision. If they're in a distance vision sport, that's all they require. That's all they want to see. As Dr. Black was talking about, an Olympic environment where you're looking at a static target at the end of the range, they don't have a need for that near vision target until they read the menu after they go home. So, getting their eyes perfectly corrected in precision, contact lenses for distance vision could be exactly what they need, even though they're 45, 50 years old and presbyopic. I'm going to let Dr. Black talk a little bit about the monovision aspect, because I think that's kind of an interesting conversation. But for a lot of our practitioner colleagues that are on this podcast and a lot of the patients that may jump on too, the monovision aspect is correcting one eye for distance vision, usually the dominant eye. We talk about that a lot in shooting. So keeping the dominant eye corrected to see the end of the range and having that near vision target be picked up by the other eye. So having 2 eyes doing specifically different tasks, kind of assigning both eyes a different task, right? One eye sees down the range, one eye sees the near target, like the end of the pistol sight or something like that. So that's an option for our presbyopes. But I think one of the things that is really exciting is the world of multifocals. The ability to be able to see it all. I mean, who doesn't want to have their cake and eat it too, right? So that's where Chris, with these really cool multifocal implants, has really kind of had an implanted version of what I can do in a contact lens. And a lot of times, working with my surgical colleagues, we'll use a contact lens as sort of an example of what they might be able to expect post-surgery. And give away, if they've never had a multifocal experience before, to say this is kind of what it looks like in a contact lens. It's not going to compare exactly, but it may give you an idea of what to expect afterwards. So, multifocals, and a cool way to explain it is really, we're talking about shooting here. The lens of choice for me, and again, thanks to our sponsor, Bausch Lomb, but the Bausch Lomb family of lenses is a very robust contact lens family with a lot of options, from really precise distance vision correction using lenses like INFUSE that are aspheric optics, meaning that they help to correct kind of a higher definition vision for that distance vision shooter. Having something which is a multifocal, like the ultra multifocal, the ultra presbyopic lens, the INFUSE multifocal, or the Biotrue multifocal, they function sort of like a bullseye in a target. So the bullseye in the target, when you put on that contact lens, is near vision. So if you think about the bullseye and the target at the end of the range, they have near vision, dead center in the middle of that contact lens. So that's effectively allowing them to see, any fright sight, any iron sight, any close, vision target in shooting. And then the periphery of that lens allows them to see all the distance vision targets that they need to see. So to Dr. Cunningham's point earlier, you don't have the peripheral distortion of progressive glasses. So you have kind of an open awareness and a little bit more peripheral awareness with a multifocal contact lens. And a really cool and very unique tool in the marketplace is the ultra multifocal for astigmatism. So they actually have, as Dr. Cunningham showed, that astigmatism, that uncorrected astigmatism sight can be a critical miss for an athlete, especially for a shooter. So being able to correct near vision, far vision, and astigmatism in a soft disposable contact lens is pretty incredible. And it's really something that doesn't exist in many places in the world. So, the Bausch Lomb family of lenses for me is always kind of my go-to. I have an elite level shooter as well that I just saw recently. He was a special forces, active duty, personnel for years. He now trains tactical shooters, has his own tactical shooting range, and, multifocal contact lenses have changed his life. He was getting to a point where his frustration level was off the chart, having to run around in dynamic shooting environments and tactical shooting with multiple moving targets, multiple different positions of shooting. We didn't talk about that yet. Standing, shooting, being prone, and being in all these different positions and having to function dynamically in that environment. When you're talking about, law enforcement, military, people that are in life and death situations, we can't have a pair of glasses that fall off. We can't have, fogging up of lenses. So being able to do that in a consistently fit, precise contact lens is really a pretty cool opportunity. So I think for me, that's kind of a quick overview on the contact lens side. But Dr. Black, can you talk a little bit about monovision? Is that a good option for shooters? Can that be a good option for shooters? I'm not the expert there. So what would you say on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So contact lenses were actually my weapon of choice. Again, no pun intended. When I was a shooter, I wore contact lenses. I'm wearing them right now. Um, now, you can do monovision in contact lenses. So one eye has a prescription for distance, and the other eye has a slightly different prescription to help you see up close. But the determining factor there is, I think, what type of shooting that you're doing. So in my sport, it was an entirely monocular sport, meaning you're using one eye to compete. In fact, we use what's called a blinder to cover up your other eye. That way you don't have to close it or squint or anything. You can relax your eyes. So one eye is completely occluded. So it kind of negates the benefit of monovision. Now, in other shooting sports like pistol shooting, that is a certainly a good option for a lot of pistol shooters because they may be focusing more on their front sight. And also, pistol shooters are doing some unique things. There's lots of different pistol competitions. Sometimes pistol shooters are moving through kind of an arena of sorts and shooting at different targets as they move. Sometimes it's just static pistol shooting at a target, downrange. But what's interesting about the monovision is typically we think of monovision as the dominant eye or the shooting eye in most cases, being the eye that's set for distance, and the non-dominant eye is typically the eye that is shaded towards up close. And when we do refractive surgery, a lot of times cataract surgeons will set patients that way. If they do a monovision or mini monovision, they do a dominance test, and they typically set the dominant eye for distance. But if you're a pistol shooter, some pistol shooters like it when their dominant eye actually has the plus lenses, so that their dominant eye focuses more so on the sights, and their non-dominant eye is actually set for distance, so they can look out in the environment, especially if there's like wind flags downrange, for example. You can see what those flags are doing and things of that nature. So there is some kind of unique things that you can play with, and that's one of the advantages of contact lenses is you can adjust those things as much as you want and play with that and tweak it to see what the shooter likes depending on their sport and kind of what their goals are. And that's one of the things that makes shooters so challenging is they tend to take up a lot of chair time because they have these really unique demands, and you might have to trial frame lenses and see what works best for them.
Yeah.
And I'd love to talk one more thing about what Dr. Black just said there too, that brought up something for me, Chris, is that, spending that extra chair time is really critical. But, these shooters, they're passionate people. They're going to spend money in your practice. Trust me. And so one of the things that I think you have to be comfortable with to fit this accurately is being okay with them bringing their weapon in. And so, these are professionals. I've worked with several Olympic shooters as well. And, after our refraction, after our exam, they know they're going to come back and see me a couple weeks later. They're going to bring their weapon in safely contained in a case. We're going to discreetly bring them back into my exam lane, and they're going to be able to get into their position and show me exactly how far their arm is going to be extended, where that sight is. I'm going to precisely measure where that sight is. If that's 36 inches, it can't be 38 inches. So I'm building a lens for him at 36 inches, and it's exactly right. So having that weapon in my room, I can take the measurement. It's a simple refraction, and the appreciation that comes back from that athlete to the time that you spend with them and building those accurate tools. Every year they come in and buy multiple pairs of glasses simply because I take the extra time to hit the bullseye and not just get close.
Keith, you brought up a good point, though, especially when you're talking about an array of options. Historically, with contact lenses, we were really pigeonholed into either a single lens, then we had aspheric lenses, then we had multifocals. And let's be honest, anything in infancy was not perfect. So the multifocals historically had this stigma that they were compromising vision at multiple distances. We don't see that nearly as much anymore. And as a matter of fact, as Chris had said, when we go into fitting these, I have plenty of shooters that say, actually, I like the contacts and they afford me a wonderful quality of life. We don't proceed with surgery if they're really happy with the contact lens wear at that point. And the other thing that's really, I think, important to understand, if you're fitting someone who's doing something at a high level, and I do this with all my baseball players, I do this with, most of my shooters, is ultimately you have to be very task specific with what you do. So I have a lot of shooters that have contacts just for the range or just for when they're out shooting, and they wear a different contact and a different type of technology when they're at work or when they're on the computer or when they're traveling. So it's like wearing high heel shoes to go play tennis. You wouldn't do that. They do two things completely separately. So, even with a lot of my baseball players, all of my baseball players a lot of times have a different prescription for what they'll wear on the field than what they're wearing in school, let's say at the University of Texas. And so, especially shooters, whether it's range, whether it's dynamic shooters, that's a lot of time different than what I have them wearing in the office environment. And you shouldn't be afraid to explore those options, especially with, like you said, you went through the whole portfolio that a company like Bausch Lomb has. They have multiple different options that will be beneficial for different things that they do in their life, and let's maximize them.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one thing that really is important to, for this entire conversation too, Daryl, is that, presbyopia is something that impacts multiple patients that we all see every day. And obviously we're focusing this conversation through the lens of shooters, but multiple athletes that we see every day, multiple patients we see every day come in with that over 40 disease, right? So, whether you're a golfer, whether you're playing pickleball at the club, whether you're, out doing, any number of different sports, shooting billiards, things like that, those are things that still have presbyopia in mind. And so, understanding and taking these concepts of precision in vision, right, and correcting that through surgical eyeglass and contact lens needs are really relevant conversations when you're talking with your golfers that are looking to play a little bit better and get a little bit more confidence out there putting on the green, but also want to read the menu at the club after their round, right? Or that couple that likes to go out and play pickleball, at the club every week, and then they still want to go out with their friends after and look at their cell phones and look at their watches and things like that, and the golfers looking at the scorecards. These are all presbyopic needs. So everything we're learning and talking about tonight, I think, is relevant in a lot of different sports with a lot of different athletes. So it's important to remember too.
Awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I mean, the main take home for me is that, you got to have a conversation with your patient. You got to know that person that's sitting in front of you. And for all the patients that may be listening to this podcast or shooters that are listening, you got to know the doctor that's sitting in front of you. If you could partner with one of these doctors on this call, by all means, travel and go see them, because, of course, they have the secret sauce to make the magic happen for you. But just know that there are tons of solutions out there, from spectacles to surgical procedures, and most importantly, contact lens that can really elevate and take it to the next level. For those that want to learn a little bit more about what each and every one of you do, but most importantly, to learn more about Sports Vision Pros, how can they get in contact with you, gentlemen?
Yeah, I think sportsvisionpros.com is our website. Take a look at it. Follow us on social media. We have a lot of interviews with a lot of wonderful people like we do here tonight. Great athletes, coaches, trainers, people coming on talking about sports and vision and relevance in multiple different sports. There's a lot to it. What we talk about is, what is sports vision? It's meeting the needs of athletes we see every day. So, lots of things that you can learn on there if you're an athlete, a coach, a trainer, if you're a doctor. So take a look at us on sportsvisionpros.com.
I love it. Thank you so much. Have a great one. Thank you for listening to the Sports Vision Pros podcast. For better understanding of vision and performance, check out our website, sportsvisionpros.com, or follow us on social media on Instagram, X, and YouTube. @Sports Vision Pros is the handle.